Welcome to Women in Leadership Talk, where you'll hear from successful women who are empowering other women with their stories of adversity, resiliency, and success. And here is your host, Vicki Bradley, founder and CEO of Women in Leadership Empowered.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Women in Leadership Talk podcast. Thanks so much for chiming in today. We're excited to have you here. And we have a wonderful guest joining us, Miss Karen Goslin from Toronto, Canada. Karen, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Vicki. I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you here and excited to talk about your new book, Yellow Paint. So we're going to get into that in a moment. But I do want to, make sure, to thank our audience for being here and reminding you, we appreciate so much that you're chiming in from 57 different countries. And if these podcasts resonate with you, please do share them, tag somebody so that they also can benefit from the great content and the amazing, amazing individuals that we're having on the show. So thank you once again for being here. So let me give you a little background on Karen so you know why I've invited Karen to join us today. So Karen Goslin has a Master of Social Work from the University of Toronto. And in 1998, she founded KG and Associates. She is passionate about guiding people toward clear transformation. She helps her clients learn to see pain, addiction, chronic illness, loss, and trauma as invitations toward change, to ultimately own the glorious life they were searching for, but believed that it was unattainable. Her work creates brave and honest spaces that enable the straight talk necessary for accountability and healing. She's now sharing her insights with a broader audience. She speaks to us with compassion and insight that was developed from her personal and her professional experiences. So today we're going to talk about that. She's just launched a new book, like it's literally brand new. So we're going to get into that. But before we go there, Karen, I'd like you to share a little bit about your story, what led you to the work you do today. I know firsthand you work with a lot of people and are, really having a significant impact on their lives. But let's just talk about, what led you to do the work that you're doing right now.
Right. Well, to be honest, Vicki, thank you for that introduction, by the way. It's always interesting when you hear your life kind of summarized, or your professional life summarized that way. You know what? I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be a social worker. It was just a calling I had within me. I yearned for having deep conversations that actually made a difference. I think there was a bit of an emotional void in the family I grew up with. My parents loved me. We were safe. We were happy. But there was just something within me that yearned for something deeper. I job shadowed my cousin's wife when I was in grade 9, and she was a social worker here in the inner city streets of Toronto. And most of the people in my life at that time, like, Karen will go, she won't like what she sees, she'll be bothered, and she's going to come back home and tell us, she's changing her mind. And if anything, it just actually enticed me more. At that point, I dove into every volunteer experience I could from like grade 9 to 13. Remember, we used to have grade 13. It was a competitive program at that time at McMaster University to get into the bachelor program. So I knew I had to really, get as much experience as I could, so I could compete. And I got right into the program, and I never looked back. Honestly, it just was something. It was my calling to do this. And then I think the other half of that is that I have a personality that is very accountable, and very bold. And so when I combined kind of a bolder personality with what I learned about mental health, that really helped me form a direction of what I wanted to do in the work that I did. And that's when I founded KG and Associates, all based on accountable therapy methods.
Nice. So that makes me curious. Because that's a very young age to know I want to be a social worker, right? So what do you think it was that drove you to, because most of us go our whole lives and still don't know what we want to be, right? But it sounds like very early on you knew, and so you kept working hard to be able to have this impact.
I did. Like I said, there was just something within me that was a calling. In the book that I wrote, I talk a little bit about my own history and how it led to the work and that I chose and how I did it. But a kind of an overview would be just a little bit about I had a very special relationship with my paternal grandmother. And that chapter in the book is called Bubbles and Giggles. So there's a lot in there just about, honestly, the experience of unconditional love. And in
Mm.
the work that I do, I know that most of our healthy selves will come from that kind of an experience where it was emotionally safe and we could really just be who we were always meant to be free to be ourselves. And that experience, that relationship that I had with her was incredibly special. I actually gave my daughter her middle name. But the second piece of my experience is because I came from a Ukrainian heritage where my grandparents emigrated from the Ukraine and started onion farming. And so there's a whole chapter about guts, right? Guts and grit of the brave decisions they made and the hard work. And
Mm.
so I know that when I combined conditional love with hard work, I was, yes, fierce about having honest, deep conversations with people that made a difference. And I was prepared to roll up my sleeves to work hard for my clients to make sure that they could make the differences in their life that they were looking for and needing. And the piece I might add to that as well is because I knew change was so hard.
Oh,
And we want change, we need change, and then we turn around and get in our own way that actually prevent the change from happening. So I knew when I combined those two parts of my own story and my personality that yes, it always had to be a loving, non-judgmental space like I had with my grandmother. But I really did have to roll up my sleeves, and I encourage and hold my clients accountable to roll up their own sleeves because otherwise we're almost confused by why the change isn't happening that we wanted.
yeah, that's a great point. So what I'm hearing, Karen, is the impetus for your book was really about your own upbringing and seeing how your grandparents had that courage to land in a new country, but also to face things, face hard things, and really work through it. And it sounds like you've done the same. But taking those experiences now and creating this book to help people see that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to have that courage and express scars and all where we come from.
Absolutely. The book, honestly, Vicki, takes it to a whole other level.
Yeah.
And I think I had chapter one written in my head probably for a good 5 years before I
Mm.
even started writing. And it honestly came from a very specific moment in my life. I knew a lot about mental health and how to provide good clinical spaces for clients, and I was doing all that work. But many years ago, I was at a very low point in my life. And I wanted to make a powerful statement about that. And the
Mhm.
statement I wanted to make in this book was that there is a possibility of getting behind the power of the deeper invitations that are part of the painful experiences we have in our life.
Mhm.
So I had experienced that firsthand at a low point in my life. And I was able to work through it. There was some power that I tapped into that I didn't even expect to do at the time, but that's what happened. And when I figured that all out, I circled back and let that inform me even clearer about the kind of work and service I was providing my clients. And I saw that make a difference. It just improved everything that I was already providing, but but put it a lot more clear.
Yeah.
And then after many years of doing that between what I experienced personally and was providing to clients, I realized it was worth a whole lot more.
Mm.
And what it was worth was that idea that if I could figure it out, if my clients were figuring this out, what if I shared it with a broader audience?
Yeah.
And that's when I just knew I was almost compelled to write this book because, like I often say to my friends when they ask me about my book, even if one person, honestly, Vicki, picks up this book,
Mm.
we don't just talk about the personal experiences, we share the actual strategies and tools that I use with clients. If one person picks up that book, gets inspired by either my personal story or the strategies, my work is done.
Yeah.
I just felt that a broader audience would benefit from it.
I love that. I love that. And you know what? I think so many of us who are in service to a greater good, a greater calling, that is how we view it. That if it helps one person, that's why I started the podcast, right? Like if
Right.
one person picks up and listens to this podcast, or one person shares this with somebody that they know needs to hear it, then we've done our job, right? Because there's no way one-on-one you can have conversations with every person to be able to express that. And so I love that you had that push
Yes,
to
I
get it
did.
on paper, get that book written,
Yeah.
and that in itself, like that's a whole magnitude of emotions and courage that it, because you could have easily gone into a spiral of, oh my gosh, is anybody going to read my book? And so I love your attitude, Karen, about if one person picks it up and they use those strategies, or the story that I'm sharing influences them to share their own story, then that's amazing.
That's right. Because, I stand by everything that I do with clients. I don't just, pull something together that I think is going to help them. I live and breathe with the same daily tools and strategies that I use.
Mm,
Um, I'm,
nice.
I'm not always using like that self-reflection in sessions where it's not appropriate, but
Hmm.
I want to know that what I'm talking to, whether it's in my book or in sessions, that it makes sense. And we adapted, of course, to different personalities or different issues that people are facing. But living and breathing by not only knowing what it's actually like to use the invitations from that turning point, but also what I need to be doing every day to take better care of myself and intercept negative thoughts or beliefs, all of those pieces once you put it all together. So, yes, people have said who've read the manuscript, it's bold, it's brave, it's vulnerable, but I have to, and I want to represent the methods that I use with clients.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. And oftentimes, I mean, like for you, like I know you're an adventurer because I know you well, right? You're a connector, and you're so gifted at being able to take things deeper, right? Regardless of if it's trauma, if it's um, even just getting to know somebody, like you'll take it to that deeper level, which I think is a gift because so often we can't. But you talk about the messy, right? And what led you to being able to ask those hard questions. Like, I mean, I personally have gone through this myself, and that's not easy, right? It's hard to put yourself under that microscope and look at the messy and why is this impacting me the way it is, or why I the way that I am. So for you, what was that moment, that
Yeah.
that time when you said, oh yeah, this is time for change?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking that. It's a personal question. It's a very personal answer, and this really was the turning point that I wanted to let readers know about.
Mhm.
So, because we will find ourselves in messy situations. Some people, change when things are going well. Most of us change when things aren't going well, when the chips are down and we're in that vulnerable place. So for me, I had gone through my own personal journey and was at a low point. I had lost someone very important to me. I had acquired a pretty serious autoimmune illness and was sick for a longer period of time. And then I lost a pregnancy, and then I lost my marriage. And and it felt like, honestly, game over.
Wow.
And for the probably the first time in my life, I felt like I could not go on. And
Mm.
everything was telling me to give up, and then I didn't. It's like I met that fork in the road and I chose the fork to the right. And it was something about not giving up when that's all I really felt like doing that made the world of difference to me. And when I got behind that power of not giving up, that's when I knew the deeper invitation. And we talk about this in the book about how we all go through disruptions in our life.
Mhm.
We have key developmental stages through trust, control, interdependence, self worth, identity, and intimacy. For me, my core wounds lied with control and self-worth.
Mm.
And everything that I was doing that was dysregulated from those two core wounds led me to that point where I was going to give up. But I just didn't know it. I was lacking self-awareness. For most of us, we're not living that consciously.
Yeah.
We will have repeated patterns, and then we're confused why we keep ending up in the same place. And that anybody else, that's what happened to me. I kept fighting too hard to find control, and I kept showing up in situations from a one down position where my self-worth was too low.
Mm.
And that kept happening over. It contributed to every painful experience. In the book, I call it my 7 invitations, right? The last invitation was when I was going to give up, and then I didn't. And it was just something within me. And this is what I try to kind of illuminate with clients and the readers, that at that point, I dug deep. And for all of us, the invitation is about going back, in my opinion, to going back to really understanding where those core wounds were.
Yeah.
Here's what I think happens. When we have those significant disruptions at one or a number of those key developmental stages, we are usually in a space of feeling overwhelmed or betrayed or even traumatized. But as humans, we want cognitive congruence. We need to make sense of what's happening. But because we're in those overstimulated states, we make it fit wrong. And for most of us, what that means is we over-personalize the problem that's happening. And what's even worse or more problematic is we take how we make those fit at that time and we bring it forward and we generalize it and project it onto any situation that looks or feels the same.
Yeah.
And of
Sure
course,
enough.
it creates more problems,
Yeah,
creates more problems.
exactly.
And then we're wondering, as I said earlier, why do we keep coming back to the same point? So for me, I got behind the power and I dug deeper to understand how on earth do I get to this point? I was a mother, I had friends, I was a social worker, I had my own business. What was going on for me? So when I deconstructed that, I was able to uncover how I had incorrectly developed beliefs around control and self-worth, right? That were inaccurate, that caused me to over personalize something that actually wasn't about me.
Yeah.
So we correct the narratives of the original core wounding experiences. And then we develop here and now strategies to use every day to uphold the new narrative. But it has to start, in my opinion, from changing the original story.
Well, don't disagree on that at all. And I think sometimes it's even understanding where that comes from, right? So it's recognizing what you were talking about earlier about that self-awareness. And when you're on the hamster wheel and you're so busy running, it's hard sometimes to see what is that, right? Or how am I being and where is that coming from, right?
That's
Like
right.
I know for myself, I'm a huge protector and advocate, and that's been my story my whole life. And it was only just 2 years ago that I, taking that deeper dive, figured out where that came from, why I was a protector, and especially for women or children,
Yeah.
right?
And
And
I would
so,
bet that whatever happened 2 years ago was some type of clashing or perfect storm that invited, maybe in a stronger way than ever before, the wake up for you.
yeah. And it was a great thing, right? Because I think, and I want us to talk about this because oftentimes there's this fear of acknowledging, right? Or even saying, oh my gosh, that actually happened, right? And so we bury it so deep within ourselves that we even begin to question, did that really happen? Or do I just believe that it happened, right?
That's right. That's
But
right.
you
Yeah.
once you uncover that, which is what you've done, there is this go forward at that point, right? Because you become so much more conscious.
It is. Yeah. Listen, our wounded selves, which we all have, are our
All of
less
us.
mature parts of self. It will go for that immediate gratification, for immediate comfort. I always say, like, short term gain, long term pain, where
Yeah.
our healthy self is usually there, but oftentimes in the shadows, sometimes even buried by all of the painful experiences we've had. Right. And the invitations get increasingly more serious. And some people never wake up, and it's tragic. I always say to my clients, never say never, though, because as long as you're alive, you have that ability to kind of bring the healthy self out of the ashes, right? And the vulnerability that comes from a deep honesty with ourselves, that whatever keeps happening in our lives, we are suffering over the long term. We push people away that we care about. We start to get health symptoms. We are underperforming in our studies or in our careers. Our relationships fail. All kinds of like negative consequences keep happening, right? So we need to almost like fire the wounded self or override the wounded self. We don't need to hate the wounded self because she or he's got a lot of good messages for us.
Oh,
So it's a
100%.
dialogue that happens, right? But it is about uncovering the healthy self because he or she wants a longer term gain for ourselves. And that actually gets us face, with living a life that we really want. So I will say, like, the wounded cells will tell us what we want. We want to protect. We want to uncover up. We want to deny. We want to minimize. We want to medicate. The healthy self goes for what we really want. And that is just a much more mature part of ourselves. And for me, when that change happened, when I made sense of those deeper experiences that I was fighting with control and self-worth, and then I added on the here and now strategies to do every day. Every time we do that, we get 1 inch closer to a life that we really want.
Yeah.
And for me, that's what I push for myself, for my clients, and now my readers. And who wouldn't want to live a life that is actually closer to what they really want?
Yeah. Like, I mean, you have the choice of the life design, right? You get to decide if you want to stay in that, perpetual state of trauma and anger. And I'm not saying it's easy. It is definitely not easy. You and I both we have been to that place where we hit the brick wall and said, okay, this is not working. So let's try a different strategy. But that's such an empowering place to be when you then, because that's actually control. You get to design what that looks like in a way that is beneficial to you, that is nurturing to you. And so why does that matter? And I know that's a silly question, but I think for our audience's purpose, why does it matter to go through the discovery, the pain, and the messy to get to that wonderful place?
Well, why does it matter? Because you ultimately get to choose the kind of life you're having. And I say this kind of at the beginning of the book. I wish it wasn't so messy. I had 7 invitations. Some people have less, some people have more, right? But I think it is in that vulnerability of the pain, right? It's almost like I had to get pushed to thinking that my only solution was to give up.
Yeah.
And it was almost like I had to get to that brink. And I don't think my experience is that different from a lot of people. Like I said, somehow we get teased into thinking that as long as things are going okay, we're okay. But really, there's a whole other story going on underneath. So I think a lot of us get pushed to that point and keep getting reminded of what's not working.
Yeah.
And for me, I literally had to get pushed to the brink of saying game over. And I think that's a fairly common human condition
Sure.
because it
Yeah.
is in that sheer vulnerable state where we are completely exposed to ourselves that, yes, our wounded self can step in and medicate it again or deny it and minimize. But what if we get tired of doing that? And for me, it's that deep honesty with self, that how I was trying to find control. Yes, as you pointed out, I was actually losing control. And the more I acted out from an unworthy place, the less worthy I felt.
Mm.
So it is that continuous decline of that wounded self. And for those of us who are lucky, we can sit long enough at that vulnerable intersection. And if we are so like distressed and unhappy, we understand, even if it's just like a little smoke signal from our healthy self, that there may be a better way. And I guess I had that little smoke signal that said, what if you don't give up?
Yeah.
And then I dug deep to do the work. It is work, but um, therapy or whatever your journey is through transformation, there is a space that empowers you.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you start to depersonalize what the very essence of your core wound is, and it's not about blaming the other people, it is about accepting, the imperfection of humans and how a set of circumstances all lined up that hurt you in the original place and time. So we don't let blame and shame eat us alive. We neutralize it. We ground it. Like what Oprah says, we give ourselves that aha moment. Aha, that's what this was about.
Yeah.
So when I realized the players in my life, how they disempowered me, but yet it was actually no conspiracy out to get me. And how when I felt like I didn't belong, that it wasn't because people didn't think I was that important or special. Once we uncover just a little bit of curiosity, all it takes is a little bit of curiosity to say, what else could this be about?
Yeah.
And when we answer that question, we depersonalize it. No matter whatever developmental stage your core wound sits on, there is a liberation that comes from understanding what really happened. And to me, it's almost magical, because once we redefine ourselves according to the truth, like that old cliche, the truth sets us free,
So true.
everything can come from that place. So once I discovered where my control really was, when I rediscovered my self-worth, every decision I made after that, I empowered myself completely. I leveled up my relationships with family, with friends, with partners, with money, with food, with health, with my career. And I want that for everybody. Like everybody who comes to my door, I want that to be what they figure out. And of course, then I wanted to translate that into the book for the readers. I just know it can happen. I know it can happen, and I know how it happens.
Well, I love your passion, and you're absolutely right. It can happen. It does require work. It's not easy, right? But I would say you're worth it, right? And what I would say, Karen, like you have a very strong will, and your will helps you walk through that messy. Your will helps you to look at what's not working and how to change that. And the tools and the strategies that you've pulled together are definitely a solid way to help someone walk through that messy and know they have support to get
Yeah.
through it.
But if you had seen me 20 years ago, you would have seen a completely different woman here,
I'm
right?
sure.
Where does my will come from? My will comes from living from my healthy self based on all of those pieces that I've talked to you about. And so this is what is here for the taking of everybody. And of course, we all have different personalities and different likes and dislikes. But do we have the power to wake up every day? This is what I say to my clients. I say, if we come to the end of a session and you don't know what you're doing differently when you wake up tomorrow morning, we've missed something. Because it has to be that specific. Yes, it's held up by that deeper energy, but yeah, what we know in this accountable process is that we have to have specific things that we know for sure we're doing differently. And so
Yeah.
just as I said a few minutes ago, how there's the spiral down of the wounded self, there is a spiral up of the healthy self. Because once we are banking experiences that are getting us closer to what we really want, we get a taste of that. We get a taste of like, oh, so this is what it's like to live from a really wanting place. We get more motivated. It doesn't mean our lives are perfect. It's like that we've seen on the social media, like the trajectory for, mental health or emotional journeys are never a straight line, but we're always moving closer. Even if we have setbacks, we learn from those and we keep
Oh,
moving forward.
100%. 100%. Yeah. And you change those setbacks, right? They become less and less when you do that work and, really lean into who it is you want to be. And you do you're the architect or the artist of your life. So you get to decide.
That's
Well,
right.
I'm thrilled that you have brought yellow paint to fruition. So where can our audience find your book?
Right. So we are still in the printing process. So we have a book website, which is karengoslinspeaks.com. And your readers, your listeners will find our book on that website and everything about yellow paint, where I'll be speaking about yellow paint. Lots of exciting things coming up that I can't even share with you right now, but I'm just so thrilled and excited for. And our pre-sales link is on that page. And we're hoping to launch this book fully in the spring, but we have events coming up, in the next several months. But everything your listeners want to find out about the Yellow Paint Project is on that website, and our Instagram is at karengoslin.therapy. And
Awesome.
we are on all channels. We're on Spotify. We're on YouTube. We're all over, and you'll keep hearing more and more about yellow paint.
Amazing. Amazing. So definitely, audience, you hear that, you see where you can pre-order the book. This is a great read. Even if you feel life is not messy, it's still a great read to help you have even more strategies to navigate the complexities that we deal with, or to share it with someone who, potentially is going through that messiness and need a little bit of inspiration or some support in getting through, what they're navigating. So Karen, I am cognizant of our time. So what would you want to share with the audience that they could take away and do one thing today? If they walked away from listening to this podcast, what would you want to see them do?
I would want them more than anything to believe that there is a clear process that we can follow to wake up to our lives, that we can sit in the knowledge, right? They say knowledge is power, right? Sitting in the knowledge of understanding what's really happened, and that getting behind the power of that is possible, that we do not have to keep repeating our mistakes. We don't need to keep suffering, right? Usually in greater amounts as we move on, that there is a possibility of having a clear process to sit in the pain, not to suffer or to indulge the pain, but to learn something about the pain that is waiting for them the whole time. That is that the universe is trying to teach them something. And that once we acknowledge that, once we rewrite the narrative that we've been living by our whole lives in most cases, and once we add in here and now clear strategies, we can live the life we really want and deserve. And then there's no looking back. It's not perfect. It has setbacks, but those setbacks usually are just reframings of the invitations that are reminding us about where we've come from and what we need to do differently.
Nice.
So
Nice.
it's that deep honesty and wisdom that knows that things aren't random, things aren't coincidental, that there is an underneath pathway that we all deserve to learn from.
Love that. Love that. And suffering is optional. So you get to make that choice.
That's
Karen,
right.
she's helping you with the blueprint of how to make a
That's
different
right.
choice.
That's right. I want the readers to know that whether they're interested in my story or whether they're really interested in having clear strategies for themselves, the book offers both. Each chapter is meant to stand on its own. Each chapter is actually a song. I'm a huge music lover. So each chapter is a song. Each chapter stands on its own. So if you're particularly interested in autoimmunity or on how to change your thinking, each chapter, the reader can pick and choose what's most relevant for them.
Nice. Nice. I love that. That's a great way to attract your audience and help them in the way they need helping.
Right.
Amazing. So Karen, thank you so much for joining us today. We're thrilled to hear about your new book, Yellow Paint. And as she said, this is 2025. I have to think about what year we're in now.
I know, right? It's so new.
That'll launch in the spring. So keep an eye out for that, or go ahead and do your pre-order. We'll have some details in the show notes, so that you can, you'll have the link that you can do that pre-order. And so Karen, thank you. I am so grateful to you for being here and being so vulnerable and courageous and sharing, some of your journey with us. So thank you for that.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. And thank you for everything you do for all your listeners. I think you said you were in 51 countries. That's incredible. Where do you go, girl? 57. Yeah, great.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Right. Yeah, I love doing this. I love, showcasing amazing people, especially women, because I think there's so much learning that can, be shared. And to your point, it's hard to do that one-on-one. So you need a platform to be able to scale that. And so we're grateful to have listeners from all over the world. And for our listeners, just let me remind you, you can visit the Women in Leadership Empowered website. We have 2 free mini series for you, one on fear, one on habits. Go into our website. You can download those. It'll give you some insight as to how to start to look at fear and overcome that, or how to build better habits. Those are free, our gift to you. So do go on to the WIL Empowered website and check those out. But thank you, everyone. I'm so grateful for you being here. And thank you for continuing to listen and sharing our podcast with other amazing listeners. And we'll see you on the next Women in Leadership Talk podcast. Take care, everyone. Thank you for joining us for WIL Talk, sponsored by Women in Leadership Empowered. To learn more about our programs, please visit www.willempowered.com. We look forward to seeing you in our community.